I hear different things here, but a study out yesterday predicted that U.S. consumers would see price increases of 8 to 14 cents per gallon if the export ban is ended. Now, that won't be in the form of user fees to repair bridges or roads. Those are going to be dollars and cents coming out of the pockets of taxpayers in this country into some of the most profitable corporations on the planet. And while some have argued the contrary, that any of the ban is going to decrease prices for consumers, I must say that in my 23 years in the Congress, this will be the first time that the oil industry will be lobbying for something that will ostensibly lower their prices and their profits. So that's a pretty interesting perspective as well. You know, I look at the American Petroleum Institute report that argued, quote, producing quality petroleum products and raw materials in America enhances our national energy and economic security. And I think that's the right approach, making investments here at home in our refineries and making sure that we hold the key to our own energy security rather than outsourcing it around the world. I've spent a lot of time when I'm jogging on the treadmill. It doesn't look like it, but I actually do. And I'm looking at TV, and there's ads that keep coming on with this very nice young lady saying energy independence for America. Well, the messaging to the average American is that energy independence for America suggests that we are using our natural resources, particularly those in federal lands and waters, to benefit America, to produce energy for America, so that we are not dependent on our energy needs from other countries. But, and there's millions of dollars being spent to send that message, but that belies the reality of certain things. So I want to get to that to understand some of this. Ms. Flournoy, isn't oil a global market?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if it's a global market, as most global markets work, basically, let's assume that we lift the ban and American companies can sell oil abroad, both those created in federal land and water, which is supposed to be for the nation's patrimony, and for which there's a big debate as to how much are actually paid for that patrimony, and those that are not in federal land and water, can ultimately, that's going to go to whoever's willing to pay the highest price, isn't it, in the marketplace?
Well, it's a globally traded commodity,
Right.
but I think our additional production could both help to reduce price and also create jobs.
But that oil is not going to stay here in the United States to help Americans.
It may or may not, depending on the market.
Well, the reality is that there are voracious appetites in the world, and we have seen it in China, in Japan, in South Korea, and others. Iran's been raised here several times. The bottom line is they want to get oil they need desperately. So I know of no national security policy, at least at this point in time, that directs specifically oil to a certain location. So the suggestion that national security is enhanced, there is a CRS report just came out in May of this year, and it says, quote, since the decision to export U.S. crude oil will be based on commercial and economic considerations not directed and controlled by the federal government, predicting and quantifying physical crude oil flows to a particular region in the world under a non-restricted export scenario is difficult and subject to assumptions that may not be realized. So we don't direct, because I oppose lifting the ban, but if you told me that as a national security opportunity that we could help our national security, let's say we wanted to keep the sanctions on Iran, and Japan and South Korea, our allies, needed oil, well, if we could direct it to them, that might be an opportunity to consider, but that's not the marketplace as it is right now. And let me ask one final question. Mr. Girard, I've seen a couple of you represent, your union represents a large number of refineries in the country. I've seen a couple of refineries close in New Jersey, losing hundreds of jobs. Isn't it a fact that what we see is a constant reduction in refinery capacity versus creating the refinery capacity that could ultimately create greater assets here at home?
We've had a number of refinery closures, as I mentioned earlier, in the last several years. A large part of that was because of their inability to get access to the crude they needed for that refinery. While at the same time, we've had other refineries, many of them on the East Coast, who have rearranged their facilities so that they could process the crude more efficiently. And as a result of those refineries, we're now producing several millions of barrels more per day than we used to. And the one point I was trying to make with Senator Heitkamp is that two things. We're still importing 47% of our crude for this country from other countries. We're not energy self-sufficient yet. And then that energy self-sufficiency, if we can get it the way you just talked about, that's going to reduce not just 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 cents per gallon for gasoline. That's going to reduce energy costs for energy-intensive industries that are in the manufacturing sector, like tire and rubber, like paper, like steel, like aluminum, and all those others. So it has a repercussion beyond the highway. And the issue of oil country tubular goods, part of what really frustrated me is that we filed trade cases because of countries that are cheating on their exports of oil country tubular goods to America. We succeed in those cases. In a country like South Korea that doesn't sell 1 pound of oil country tubular goods in its own market is flooding our markets. So right now in the oil country tubular goods, because they play illegally, India, China, South Korea, and others, our domestic share of oil country tubular goods in the last 3 years has dropped down to 50%, which means the oil companies or the people selling wanting to buy the drill pipe don't give a damn if it's made in America or not. And as a result of that, we're losing our capacity. So we're not going to be able to have our national security if we can't even generate the pipe that we need for pipelines or for oil country tubular drilling. So to answer your question, yes, refineries have closed, but it hasn't been because they're inefficient. It's because they couldn't access the crude they needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.